Okay, hello. So this is going to be a long book reading, and if you aren't already familiar with some of my writings, then it'll just be a good idea to know that based within it's based within some information, and it doesn't all have to. It's almost like realistic fiction, but there's aspects to it that I've come to know are true in my life, and we're just gonna be reading over these types of informational passages, and then we'll just move along. And so I hope you guys enjoy the reading and the process of the reading. So, the equinox shield over planet Earth and the Andromedan energy. Along with the equinox, we will be seeing a massive shielding over planet Earth, blocking and preventing dangerous or hazardous space debris, along with psychic protection from the dwarf planet or planet X. So yeah, this is going to reference star planets, and this is going to reference information. So let's start again, and then we're going to get into it. So the equinox shield over planet Earth and the Andromedan energy. Along with the equinox, we will be seeing a massive shielding over planet Earth, blocking and preventing dangerous or hazardous space debris, along with psychic protection from the dwarf planet or planet X. The shielding holds potential for an increase in hazardous air quality. The ET extraterrestrials or Andromedan energy will be shielding Earth, prepare or avoid the imbalance or craziness from others. This means taking caution when going outside. Also, if you notice a bright beam from the sun or an increase in silence from your hearing, it means you are noticing the protective qualities from the shielding event, and you will be in tune with the before mentioned frequencies. As the planet enters the fifth dimensional time space reality, there will be a shift in how we begin to form our collective thinking patterns, especially the thinking patterns we hold over the victims within our society. It is critically important as we stay loving, especially towards the more criminal populations, in order to provide the most for our shielding process and to not shame those that have not begun or are asleep towards their path. I emphasize December 14th as a day in which the shielding process will be at its peak. It's important to allow for the potentiality of Earth's more significant events, as this will be one of them. As far as divine remembrance goes, it's the remembrance of the guidance of our universe will make a leap towards higher dimensional aspects for our collective whole, and humanity will find the awakening necessary to affect those on a path of being asleep. The interconnectedness will be reminded and felt into throughout the process, and the feeling will follow and begin once the ETs start the initial process. Remembrance is key, as well as the alignment in each human for protecting the sacred source and all of divine creation, including this earth dimension, and staying true towards the truth that we are source living as a human and not the other way around. Connect towards your intuition, and the protection will follow as we have implemented the shielding for a divine reason. The Andromedan extraterrestrial force will encourage and will see that 5D being held throughout the process, as they will send their light and there will be a peak in frequency at the fifth dimensional level. Chapter 1: The Passage into Time. I begin that stating my life began into the journey of what I'd call the archetypal awakening. Having been influenced at a young age, I was often taught to avoid male attraction or I would burn in hell. I remember it crushing me, yet as I discovered the silvery orange sunset and the setting of each natural mature scenery, something told me different. It was in fact the underlying connection I found within the masculine that would teach me true knowledge as well as the teaching of what it means to be human. This connection I'd find with another indigo male child, we would form and find hope in each other, and due to our dire circumstances, would find outlets to torturing my young mind and imagination from learning the basic teaching I was getting with public education, and this would inspire the other male indigo child to undergo intensive therapy conditioning that conditioned him to think that education would be the way and to avoid bringing up the whole Trinity at all costs to the adults to grow away from this religious input. I would learn that I was connected to something eternal outside of what they were teaching. Like an inward candle, I would turn my light in times of darkness. In fact, I remember one specific night where I would get extremely ill with a fever and how badly this would scare my inner child. For I was being hounded by the archetypal deity, we'll call him, and that's only increased my ability to stay very ill and burn with a fever until eventually my parents hooked me up and I felt a still presence, which I will explain later on. The pressures of everyday life would come to a close as I decided to walk away from my childhood bullies and decide to pursue language and music arts. This is when I would move, and the indigo child that felt into me felt release and sadness in a way, for he knew we had reached a closing point in time. But I remember feeling with him that our focuses had done something tremendous, especially when glaring soft heartedly at the sunset and sharing a common feeling of love. Next, I would be entrenched with a sudden feeling to meet someone, a girl I had no clue of or how we would even meet, for I was still attending something at that time. And what would happen next from a personal account was like a hellish paradise. They say that we are here on earth not to manifest the form of paradise, but to understand that to bring down a heaven down to earth. I remember lying down feeling dread, for I knew there would be a practical outlet for the two of us to meet, and this forced meeting would ensue for a long time. But I tried listening to the more spiritually innate teachings. Maybe she was my twin flame or other half, as you would call it, and so I continued on. I remember repeating manifestos or mantras to her. Maybe he was older from getting away, but not without an old form of judgment from her, as though this isn't what we should be doing, and I got a feeling sense from the substance of the marijuana plant. I then went on to meet her. For a lack of better term, she blew me away. It was something about how we laid eyes on each other that amplified my ability to connect with her intuition in a way that enabled further progress even when we were apart. This sped up of events, and when we were together, we would embrace and feel whole with one another. I kept feeling at home with her, and the feeling was mutual. We were both brainiacs, and this kept us motivated, and we found peace and love in each other's presence. That is when a convergence ensued, and it was as though words and translation we promised we would never be apart, even if time and space separated us. My dream is to go to Culver. This is my main support, and I feel guided towards you as well, Clark. This ample amount of time we spent was beautiful and miraculous, and I will never forget it, and we will stay together. My words. And so we parted ways and enabled each other's progress, but not without a miracle occurring, his name Thomas. But I would find out later, and due to the vision I held towards the paradise we had seen through the substances, and which knew the spiritual realms of consciousness, and I knew we would encompass on a harsh fate of meeting two false male twin flames which appeared in the night sky as red and green lines connecting to the stars. And this fate would make its manifestation later on and would remind both of the map of love is one that can be conquered in a sense of awe and perfection. For we are embodied parts of the divine, well and complete, regardless of the masculine and feminine energies that intercross. And so I would go on. We would eventually embark on a traveling mission that helped us to see the world more acutely in real time. But amidst the several events, she would end up hating the missing aspects of life traveling and a difficult aspect towards life engulfed us. But I remained hopeful in the Chinese ancestry that we shared and the memories of time spent together in nature. Next chapter, an in depth analysis of what I'd find in nature. There was a mantra I wrote in nature once. The longer you wait for assistance is when you are suffering, and the longer you suffer in and of itself is not what divine creation desires. The inner desire or restriction to go forward into the unknown path that we face as the universe expands is what the divine creator has insisted upon for the millennia to come. I learned through an in-depth analysis of the plants and animals that this mantra had truth to it. I'd say staring in the blue-like essence of fine-tuning into the sacred aspects of nature, that from much progressing has landed into a peaceful state of consciousness, rather than the one I found when I was younger. One I found when I was younger, a feeling of entrapment and a feeling of that was hounded by wolves. This helps me that source takes time as a necessary teacher in the lifelong journey, and that source is always guided by higher intelligence, as well as that making can be as well as that release brought back into your life. In a way, it doesn't feel bound by lucidity, and due to my remembrance of the delusory thoughts, patterns that had a real sense of false lucidity, ones that are written about, such as in Alan Watts' material. When the baseline roots has a meaning that the soul is of a life force that is dependent on everything, and everything that surrounds nature has a tangible feeling of sacred nectar. The material Valen wants is a way of focus of interdepressive states upon philosophical nuances, something that I would like to call the cave-like understanding, where aliveness overtakes you. For he was a tremendously alone man who eventually passed of alcohol poisoning, the invigorated passing of the invigorated, a sense of no matter how far I go, I must remember my ability to stay grounded in a feeling-based dimension that deepens waves taught me. But this feeling based dimension, which grounds you to the humanistic journey of top to bottom of the emotional spectrum, This is when the more extraterrestrial influences and ETs come in, for I found we are not alone in the universe. In fact, the higher dimensional thinking groups of ETs is that interconnected, we work towards this Earth realm and seemingly have a major role in the process of DNA, a concept known as panspermia. They had this sacred role in the evolving humanity. I'd like to think of the human race as benevolent and intelligent, for we are and have gone through many conjunctures and periods of the archetypal times. Yet, even viewed free and from the state of interconnectedness, we need to remember the fundamentals of learning throughout the process of maintaining life of humanity, for it is a cancer in the soul for us to think of humanity as a hive mind project only to be picked at by the higher control of the reality and placed for the agenda to be diminished, and as the humans, source living as humans, have to get power to determine the antics, which are pretty profound. It reminds me of the more easily available resources, souls as working in the ground of planet Earth, reprocessing the being ability to rest and combine its chemicals, not to only be remembered in the spectrum of dopamine and serotonin, but the minefield of energetic potential to reach and receive information. This is why it's critical not to only be reassured in the big picture type of way, but to allow for higher interconnectedness not to be inputted through the waves of psyche. For we have gifts, and our gifts are not always meant to be made and monitored for the lack of well being. That is the causation in the first place. So, yeah, the causation is the fact that because there are. So, because So because because the higher picture is seeking itself, therefore the causation of the problems are because of the lack of well-being and the monitorization. Because when you input the waves of the psyche itself, and then I hope that makes sense. I'm going to continue. Remembrance is key within Source, and this allowance of wisdom from the overall picture towards the interconnectedness of oneness needs time and allowed space to grow and overcome obstacles associated with the external world. Yeah, so I was right. It's kind of like it's like that mirror of the external world versus the internal world. It's like a mirror. And so it can be like pulled apart and kind of like if you're not careful, it can be picked at by higher control, is like the point I'm trying to make. And from the major point of aspectual data that renews energy and effect towards the highest good for the greatest amount of people, there is a passage I'd like to share. From this moment, I am happy and content with a profound sense of alienation, yet this doesn't impact me negatively. Her response, yes, while this may be true, it's important to remember what caused that, a great level of integrity. And they reminisce together in the unforetold events that happened in the past to serve expansion. And with this came magnitudes of responsibility, for they had loved each other, and that was what mattered most in this current moment in time. Fast forward of events. He lands a chair facing the jury wall that exposed mantras in Turkic language as he laid his eyes on the mail that would exacerbate much precision and getting away. His language made me feel crazy, and that was the only way to be made of the meeting of their true souls. It was the internal drive that sparked as they made eye contact that this craziness from his language gave him a reassurance that the soul he was meaning to meet all those years was me. They exchanged stories, both encompassing a great amount of feeling from how they used to be and this feeling of never ending vitality. Yet the smirk gave me the feeling that he wasn't there to make the best of the time, in fact, only to dwell on this lost paradise through the realms of consciousness only found in plant medicines. Yeah, me being a caring individual found it sad, and due to the fact that I would tell he longed for a rekindling of something that was taken away from him from the powers that be. I was in shock, struggling with what to say next. This moment of epiphanies before I realized that he used to do um he used to do drugs for the ER, and that he was found before he was lost to become unlocked for another time being. All that he would take was his soul strength and a very tangible possibility to ensure he would be found or find his way home. In that moment, I knew he was my brother. I digress as time spent with my brother ensued. I remember the allowance of energetically balancing to be uncovered, for I knew I was close towards finding my lost love months ago, and that rekindling of twin connection would embark on a self somehow, somewhere. As I rode home that night, I would be in faint memory of the red and green lines in the sky, for I knew I had made contact with the last false male twin flame, and this brought a feeling of elation, and I remember that destiny always resides within. Chapter 3: The Twist. As sudden changes occurs, I could see dimly, enter the candlelight as a place I've always wanted to travel, and the pioneers of spirituality pointed there. I'd stare at this candle for hours, imagining the conducting of where I might go, somewhere to improve. I have a chance to embark on a journey of us, so concretely based it would amaze her, and this is what my higher heart wanted for the two of us. Fast forward. As I lay in nature close to where I lived, I meditated into a rest of blackness of space. Do not make this, but mistake this for the void, for this blackness of space was full of potential and possibility and expansion. The science behind it. The black matter theory, the blackness in space which surrounds the globe dark matter, is a hypothetical form of matter thought to amount for approximately 85% of the matter in the universe. In the standard Lambert CDM model of cosmology, the total mass energy content of the universe contains 5% ordinary matter and energy, 27% of dark matter, and 60% of a form of energy known as dark energy. Now, I'd like you to picture unlimited amounts of space. We oftentimes think of this dark energy as nothing, or if it is correlated with emotions such as fear or the unknown. This is what intrigued me in that Panspermia, a notion that life on Earth emanates from extraterrestrials rather than animalistic types of models. In fact, it is my belief in this moment of when my ego had clicked offline that the majority of black space matter contains all that is infinite and all that is possible. Even though we do have animal ties, so I'm not gonna lie, we do have animal ties. Um, for near-death experiences would lead me to believe that the white light is in accordance. So this is talking about death. Um, for near-death experiences would lead me to believe that the white light is in accordance with this black space. Yet I don't overemphasize the white light and we face for death for a serious reason, as it goes to say that the universe has mystery can be understood further as long as the higher self exists to seek each and every soul, that the majority of human cells do have extraterrestrial DNA. And the near death experiences that have unfolded for me that would allow me to believe in this theory, a very critical role in the evolutionary path of humanity. Yet, as my opposing force states from Cryon, a loving angel from the central sun would concur as to not look for healings from these forces. As I see it in this argument is a very weak one, and my counter argument would be what is to reject and or disown planets which cannot be seen that exist in a higher dimensional input would be like seeking a hole in one, for lack of a better term, for to only believe in the awareness that humans can achieve, and the awareness seems to be limiting. There might be caution when approaching this topic, and due to the malevolent forces that exist, my final thesis is that taking all that there will ever be and allow for higher guidance to showcase itself, even if it is unseen or behind the curtain. Do not mistake this for a blind trust, for it is not, it is allowance. For there are beings who access the light, for guides and angels also have roots in otherworldly realms. This is my manifestation towards the ET races that exist. Chapter 4. An ever growing need to be still. An ever growing need to be still. On behalf of what occurs throughout the context that we are all one, meaning the belief in oneness, I go back in time towards the ever growing approach towards how we can find growing states of calmness from our grounded physical vessels and how we trust within each other once again. No, it is not the stillness of our physical needs that we must maintain. It is the stems that from processing between the ocean's waves that we listen to. Chapter 5: Igniting. In this, you see golden rays. From the golden rays that transmit from source into the galactic center, which accommodates intuition as well as a neutral force within how to entail the written aspects towards governing laws as well as more religious texts. The separation of the two, this ignites the realms of the possibility to undertake, and more can be seen from the passage of time in which the context of human evolution history fell from the fall of Rome and the sailing of Christopher Columbus. I have very agitated views on Columbus. I have on the subject, which is the underlying power from which the human history decided to fall into more evolutionary traits with more white Nordic looking humans and the collapsing of the more indigenous lands and people. It is an objective viewpoint, but it still stands that we unite regardless. As we are one with creation, and this mustard anger that transcends the physical processes, and the brutality grows very noticed, and is to be understood of a great evolution that stems from the destruction that goes known even in today's light. This understanding when we wouldn't have been able to evolve further and we would not have been constructive in the conquering of the white man's burden, this in itself grows respected, and awareness in this subject will lead to further discoveries and hindsights for how to move forward in the new or modern age. However, modern does not always insinuate that of a stationed or stagnant energy, for we still have this to the battles, and there we develop from knowledge rather than ignorance, and one can receive more rather than less information through forming and gathering the necessary advantage towards common goals or the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. Internal monologue. Remember last night I was wondering about the regurgence towards the in between. The stars waited for her response. My soul became one as I was lying down. When? He responded with a slight glance in his eyes. It happened with the moon. I was lying down when all of a sudden everything around me, including me, shrunk, and I couldn't bear it any longer, yet it was so mysterious. They finished that sentence together. Deep like the ocean? Yes, and I am small, as though nothing could touch me, and I was very still. The moon shined in on her eyes. Wait, the remembrance isn't as important, remember? Her responses started getting repetitive, and he knew that obsession was creeping in, a tendency she had when his higher self interacted with hers. And so he left clouded in his mind. He held on the long car rides home, yet he loved her more in that moment, for honesty rang true in her words, and the lasting impact of this would bring them closer until the great trust to find in each other. As he did when they were to come to frustration of the scheduling, he had a night where sadness and sudden craziness or not so incredibly stable behavior occurred. He ran so fast as he could across the road towards the river, through the green plant in the river, for he had felt that the water plant forsaked him, and he sat down near the water to watch his breath. Then breath began to interact between them, and there began an ever flowing, steady heartbeat between two of them and the sun for a second or two. First in their vision for this act, and it ensued more of the torture schedules. The sun was a reminder of this, and so they lay together that night, wondering if, too, the bewilderment of such obstacles as to remain calm as possible, for they knew there was a great weapon of peace that would satisfy her urges and increase his need to find out the peace with what had occurred so rapidly. And so they entered the building together, not making eyesight through the signs they received together, more chaos undertook. He sits down and can find the breeze outside, the routine, something off about the window. Suddenly, nature begins to increase in both their ears, and nature in its unforgiving form. She tries to stay studious, nervously tapping her pencil, yet the sudden impact of the scheduling and the impact began, and they leave early, for nature has a calling, and the embrace that she longed for, his embrace as they left. Now, beginning again, it's critical to remain in your truth as your truth as an individual, yet more so your truth as the human creator of your own reality, and the hindsight for how to encompass larger truths to intermingle amongst a hindered agenda. It's critical to remain centered in truth and in his words, for how can we reach truth without its core? And without its core, where will it begin? We can't come to know sacred truths without first recognizing it in ourselves. And from love, the larger picture begins to form in a way of Source's design, or the human design, and how it relates to finding or remembering your truth that has always existed within, and to clear on or to remember your sacred aspects towards underlying truths that opposes human conditioning. This together through obstacles and challenges through the bridges and tests of time. Chapter 7, the final chapter, in her words. The overlying agitation towards his internal compass that I found, or rather the moral compass within him, is this. The larger picture seeks itself throughout a grand design that accommodates humans towards the greatest outcome. Even if you feel always that you're remembering your soul's family, your inner truth as it relates towards soul growth and as it relates towards hindrance, this assistance is critical within the forces, more importantly within the angelic forces, assistance will become the more hidden and unseen forces that we all which we can know from what we know. The end. And then this is going to be the last passage, and then we're going to go. And I hope you guys enjoyed the reading process. So this is called The Diamond Shadow. We begin in the earth plane as in Bridge, a small village. One traveler lurks into a city and begins an exploration. This, in and of itself, is not a negative or anything to be disdained. We are often taught in society that expectation falls under another expectation or rule. These rules are always meant to be followed, or severe punishment, backed by a force that has haunted many for centuries, that many follow the chaos that all underwent during the decade of the earlier 2000s. Unfortunately, with political rule, we followed an outdated system, for the following outcome being an extraterrestrial intervention that took. Everyone remembers the event of the 9/11, and I will explain how, interpreted correctly, it can go very short statedly that Bush operated with Third World Order narratives. I will explain how this experience taught me very valuable lessons about extraterrestrial influence. I will also quote from the book that for the family of light, the pleading tales of the lessons in living. Thousands of years, each person on earth has become compartmentalized in what he or she believes, disconnected from real thinking and from the self and other people. At the foundation of your worldview is the idea of separation, which is not necessarily the wisest of founding principles. As light and cosmic energy arrive to affect your planet, the founding principle will begin to collapse like an ancient infrastructure built in an improper place. Structures can be viewed from the future, so as to consider the generations to come. Your ancients built structures on the planet in this way that have lasted far longer than your modern buildings will, because they had a broader understanding of the cosmos. They were in contact with the heavens as well as with the earth, and they were motivated by the idea that everything is alive. They considered ether, representing spirit and the invisible realms, as a fifth element. Do you expect there to be a norm of extraterrestrial intervention in our world today? No. Rosita, the guide from the Arcturians, states that all will be experienced once love abounds or expands. We will never, as an Earth plane, enter a third world order one government currency because, as it is operating currently, we have a holding ground over Earth's magnetic field. You see, back when Earth was expected to go into decay and destroyed in World War II, Gaia sent out her call to thousands of Earth warriors, lightworkers, empaths, starseeds, and many more that came from other galaxies. So to insist that we would ever enter a timeline in which the government took ownership of the planet is to intercede the origin of how the Earth was created in the first place. To send out a vibrational field, the Earth must receive a calling or frequency and there is no power out there that we know of yet. And knowing this is everything we encounter, meaning exists. And to deny any portion of our planet a free will zone is the vibrationally state. We have actually witnessed the kind of portion to the Earth's frequency, and it is more harmless, but to maintain the boundary within what he experienced in the orange field of lights throughout this small city. There begins with a male once again breaking the rules and found himself on the top of a trial of the hill, overlooking a forecast of energies, vibrations, and especially reds and blues. Earth is a standing ground for experience. When you come across a dark sky that emits a vibrational frequency of pure love and light from the stars, there is an overcoming of fear united within the frequency of extraterrestrial influence. We can all do this to reach from the stars and ask, why are you here and what did you come through with? The earth is an embodiment of such peace within the stars, and asking what's out there will empower you as an embodiment of source. You are a human, yet you receive with such clarity an exceptional answer underlying the empowerment from within. There you can do anything your heart desires, such as asking for angels and spirit guides to come forward and assist you in the transition. This is essentially what the male counterpart embodied on his journey into the red and blue sky. Next comes from a portion and excerpt of the kind of living DNA that we all inhabit here on planet Earth, and it's within the cells of those who came before us, the ancestors. The red kinds of energy help us deliberate between our species, and the blue come as the form to remind us of our extraterrestrial DNA. These deities have experienced life on Earth before, but don't remember the experience, only the memories. Some, mainly all, have come from the majority being benevolent. But we aren't taught this enough, and due to our history consisting of solely a catalyst versus a receiver kind of pattern and events in history. What caused women to have to work slave jobs in buildings until they were burned to death? And outbursts of feminine power restricting males having taken their ability to work and not become housewives. It always follows the same pattern or cause and effect. Synchronicity does not work like this. You simply have to believe it and it will happen and it will. There are detailed there are detailed amounts of examples of this when you choose empowerment over a victim state kind of mentality. So this kind of earth walking goes much noted and that we see the unknown not in the eyes of our primal eyes, but through the eyes of the Creator. Call him Buddha, Christ, Alamid, but all these teachers point to the path of least suffering, of what they would call a heaven or nirvana. It's important that we realize these truths through much journeying and exploration of our past, as our past holds the truest kinds of answers relating to our potential future and operating from the now moment. He realized throughout the exception of the rule that it was mainly being created from his own imagination, and there exhibited the kind of freedom that overtook his psyche. Okay, gratitude. Namaste.